This video is a good intro to statistics. We're going to talk about measures of central tendency, and we're going to focus on mean, median, mode, and range. But before we do that, I thought that it would be a really good idea to define what exactly statistics are before we decide to delve into stats. So one of the things that I saw on Google would be a very good definition, which is essentially that it's collecting or analyzing data. And in our case, we're talking about numerical data, so using numbers. So I'm going to write here collecting and analyzing, and I'm going to write numerical data. So statistics is collecting and analyzing numerical data. Often we can also refer to it as stats, because statistics can be a bit annoying to say over and over and over again. Now, what exactly do we mean by like data or data, whatever you decide to pronounce it as? But data is basically just facts, numbers that we collect. And in this case, it depends on the situation that we collect data. So for example, data can be different depending on the context. In math, though, we deal with numbers. So when I say data or data values, I'm talking about numbers. So now that we know what stats are, what data are, we're going to go straight into talking about one of the first important things in stats is, which you've heard before maybe, the mean. Now the mean is also known as the average. So I'm going to write that here so that everybody, because you might have heard average before if you're dealing with school, if you're dealing with the news, if you're even dealing with everyday conversation, you usually use the word on average or the average. So what this lesson is going to teach you is how to actually calculate what the average is. Basically what you need to do is you need to take the sum of all the data, and I hope that you know that sum in this case means add or addition. The sum of all the data divided by, this line here is divided by the total number of values of data. Now, what exactly does that mean? So, a very good example would essentially be a test mark. So for your mark on a test, what we do is we calculate your total mark over the total maximum amount of marks that you get over the total mark of the test, we'll say. So for example, if you've gotten 14 out of 15, it means that you got 14 marks out of a total of 15 marks, and that is considered the average. When you divide it, you get something like 14 divided by 15, and then you would multiply that by 100, and you would know that your average for that is 93%. That is your average or the mean. So that's the easiest way to talk about mean. So remember, sum of all data over the total number of values of data. We're actually going to come back to mean in a second because there's another thing that I need to show you in terms of calculating the mean, but we'll hold on that for a second. Then we're going to talk about the median. The median, a lot of people like to call it the middle, but it gets a bit complicated sometimes when we are talking about the middle. If you have an odd number of data values, the median is in the middle. And if you have an even number of data, there will actually be two middle numbers. So you have to take the average or mean, because you know what that means now, of the two middle numbers. Now, what's very important in this case is that your values must be ordered from smallest to biggest. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you an example of all the mean, the median, and the next ones that we're going to learn as well at the very end of this lesson. So stay tuned, but for now, this is what you need to know. But honestly, even if you're not calculating the median, you're calculating any of the other measures that we're going to talk about today, I think that ordering them from smallest to biggest should be your first step, no matter what. So the median is the middle value or the middle values, and then the last of the measures of central tendency is what we call the mode. The mode is pretty easy to find. It's the number or data value that occurs the most frequently. Now, a few exceptions to this. Number one, there can be more than one mode. So, for example, if you have something that shows up more than once twice, so if you have something like 5, 7, 11, 12, 11, and 7, you have 7 here and you have 11 here, and they both show up twice, so they are considered as two modes. So 7 and 11 are the modes. The other thing that you can also expect is there can be no mode. Basically, if there's no mode, it's because everything shows up one time and one time only. So for example, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 are a set of data values. They all show up once and only once. So none of them is showing up more frequently than the other because they all show up once. So there can be no mode, there can be more than one mode, or of course there could only be one mode, something that shows up way more than everything else. So we've done mean, we've done median, we've done mode. And the last measure, which isn't quite a measure of central tendency but is part of the mean, median, mode, is what we call the range. The range is very easy. It's calculated by doing the difference, and I hope that when I write difference here, I mean you usually use subtracting. So the difference between the biggest value and the smallest value. And that's why when I said earlier, like sometimes it's actually a very good idea for you to already put all of your numbers in order from smallest to biggest, because it will help you calculate several of these different stats. So for example, if you have 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5 as your data values, you would just do 5, the biggest one, minus 1, which is the smallest one, and 4 is your range. So it's as easy as that. What I'm going to do here is I'm going to have a set of numbers for us here, just to give us an idea of what we have to do. So here's a set of numbers that is an example of all of my data values. So these are considered data values. And before I do anything, I'm going to show you what I like to do when I order them from smallest to biggest, because sometimes you're actually going to be given a lot of different data values and it can be a bit confusing and you could easily make a mistake, forget a number or so on when you're rearranging them. So what I like to do is I like to go through them and say, okay, 12 is the smallest one, and then I cross it out. And then I keep going and I see that 14 is the next smallest one, so I'm going to cross that one out. 15, 17, 18, and then I have 20, 20, so I have two 20s. Then I have a 22, a 23, 22, 23, and a 26. So they're all centered, and now I can easily see everything in order. I can see what's in the middle. I can see all of these things. So the first thing that we're going to do, and I'm going to change colors here, is I'm going to calculate the mean. So the mean is the total number of data over the total number of values that we have here. So in this case, we have to add all of those numbers here together. So we're going to have to do 12 plus 14 plus 15 plus 17 plus 18 plus 20 plus 20 plus 22 plus 23 plus 26 over, and if I go to the first one here, we said over the total number of values of the data. In our case here, I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 values, so we're going to divide it by 10. So that's not so bad, because when we calculate it, we have that the mean is going to be 187 divided by 10, which is 18.7. 18.7 is the mean. It's okay to have decimals. It's actually very common to have decimals, but that's how you calculate the mean. The second thing that you learned was the median, or the middle. Now, because I have 10 numbers, it's an even number, I actually have two things in the middle. I have 18 and I have 20. And if I go back to my notes on median, if I have an even number of data, which I do, I need to take the average of the two middle numbers. So going back here, the two middle numbers is 18 and 20. So the average would be 18 plus 20 divided by the number that there are, and there's 2, 18, 20. So we're going to divide it by 2, and we get that our median is 19. So that's the median. the next thing that we learned was called the mode, and the mode is the number that occurs the most often. If I look here in our set of data values here, the number that occurs most often are the 20s, and it's so much easier for you to see once you've ordered them from smallest to biggest because you can actually see the clusters. So our mode in this case is simply 20. And the last thing that we learned was the word range. And the range is just the biggest number, which is 26, minus the smallest number, the difference between the big one and the small one. In this case, if we do 26 minus 12, we get that the range is 14. So that's how you calculate mean, median, mode, and range. But I do want to talk to you about one extra thing, and it's kind of like a bonus. Calculating the mean, calculating missing values given the mean. So what I mean by this is it's possible for you to calculate a value that is missing if you are given all of the other values and its mean. So here's a question. Here are 9 data values out of 10. The mean of all 10 values is 59. What is the missing value? So here you are given 9 data points, but there are 10. We call this one X. This is the question mark. This is what is the missing data value. So it's a very easy step-by-step process. The first thing that you're going to do is you kind of want to set up what it is that a mean is equal to. So we knew that mean is equal to sum over total values. So what do we know? We know, let me just write a line here. We know that the mean is 59. We know that the sum of all of them is basically we're going to have to add the 30, the 58, the 61, the 59, 70 plus 60 plus 62 plus 61 plus 57, which going forward is actually 518. That's the sum of all of them. But then we have this x that we don't know, so we have to add them all up. We have this x divided by the total values. Well, there are 10 total values, so you're going to divide it by 10. That's our setup. Now, it's very simple. After this, all you're going to do is you're going to do this number here times this number here. So you're going to take the mean times the total. So you're going to do 590 is equal to 518 plus x. And then the last step is you're going to take this number, and you're going to do the big number, which is 590 minus 518, and that will actually give you what x is. In this case, x is 72. Now, to help you out, I'm going to write out step by step what we've done. So 1, you need to add all values that were given together. That's the first step. The second step would be to multiply the total, and I'm going to write here denominator because everybody should know what the denominator is, by the mean, which it should have been given. And then the last step is to subtract number 2 with number 1. So you do the product, so this is the product. You're going to do the product minus the sum. And just so that we're all on the same page, add, this is the sum, the product, you're going to do product minus sum, and that would equal to missing value. To go with this video, there's a handy notes package that has all of this broken down for you. But essentially what you have learned in this lesson is you have learned the measures of central tendency, which are mean, median, mode, and then the last one, which is range. Then we did some examples together doing mean, median, mode, and range, and I also helped you find the missing value given the mean. And don't forget to just follow these steps. If you do, you should always get the right answer each and every time. So that is your intro to statistics and measures of central tendency.